have this mock-up of this shower pan. It is not quite, well, it's actually about the size that you would have anyway if you did some scabbing on the side. But the reason I'm doing the mock-up is because there is a video out there that purports to prove, which I'm very skeptical of. That video has to do with the proof of a shower pan pre-slope being true. And that video is from Isaac Ostrom. He basically does a pre-slope in a little larger than I have mock-up, probably about twice this size. But the point is that he wanted to show the pre-slope work. So he did this mock-up. He put a shower pan liner in. He put some mud inside of here. He let it dry, and then he poured some water, and he marked on the bucket where the level of water was when he started. And then when he finished, you know, that he basically said only some ounces were missing. So, to me, that's an unfair experiment because it doesn't show the opposite. It doesn't show a shower pan without a pre-slope.
Please don't fight me on this.
So the idea being is that if you had a pre-slope, that all the water on your pre-slope goes first, and then your shower pan liner, and then all the water that could potentially get into your pan material, i.e. the mortar, would go down to the pan liner and naturally want to gravitate down to your weep holes because you put a slope on it, 1/4 inch per foot. The reason I dispute that, and I do have a video I did some years ago about pre-slope explained, is that you have mortar material, and that's Achilles' heel. So if you had only the pan liner and you poured water on it with that slope, yes, water might gravitate down to where you have the slope to. But in the absence of gravity, which you don't have because instead you have capillary action, same as if I water a plant, all the water doesn't go straight down to the bottom of the pot, is my point. The water goes into the dirt, gets expanded out with capillary action, and the more water you pour in it, the more likelihood that the water will go down to the bottom of the pot eventually because there's so much water saturation. But by that time you have a completely saturated pot of dirt, and so any water that ends up at the bottom could potentially, if there was a slope at the bottom of that pot, go down into some type of center hole that you have. But that's disputable, and it's been disputable for a long time. There is no proof on the internet except for the supposed proof that Isaac brought across that a pre-slope actually functions as intended, because I said functions as intended. That's the key word. So anyway, without further ado, I have set this up actually inside. I'll do the mortar and all that stuff out in the garage, but right now it's kind of cold outside. I want to make sure that my pan liner eases up around the corners nicely. And I'm going to get started. I have some pan liner here that I'm going to put in here. I'm going to staple it to the sides. So I'm not going to go through the whole process of showing everything, but you'll get the gist of it. And eventually I'll have a mortar bed that I'll probably let set for about a week or so, maybe a little bit longer. I want that mortar to cure really, really well. So the ideal time is about 20 days, 22, 23 days on cure time with cement products, but I'm not going to wait quite that long.
I recall Central Park in fall. Not a shame.
I want you to see this on this particular one, and I think this was a used one I had taken out of a shower at some point where it had failed. But if you can see here clearly, let me do a little close-up. I don't zoom very much, but I'll zoom for you. You see those little troughs? So you got 4 of those troughs at the bottom. That is right in line with the flushness of the pan. So if any water got in here, it would want to go into those troughs. And then if it flooded too much, it would go that little 1/8 of an inch and go up to that trough, because there's 6 of those. 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 6 of those. And then you have the weep holes right above that in case everything goes wrong. And then in addition, look at those huge holes, which are actually bigger than the weep holes. So those are another backup method. And as you can see, because I don't cut a circle, which I think is silly, there's no point. I cut an X and then I just push my flange down so the flaps go in a downward position. So all my water should go down and not come back up, even if the drain backs up. It doesn't have this ability to go up to this place where a lot of guys will cut it and then hope for the best when they do the caulking on the inside here, as you saw. That's just the way I've done it for years. I backed off of this when I was setting this barrel, because you want that positive, you want to hear that click, you want to hear that positive thread go down. Don't misthread it. Speaking of threads, all else fails, there's little troughs that are cut inside of the threads, both on the left and the right of this drain. So there's a lot of ways of egress with water. Don't get hoodwinked into believing everything that you hear about just weep holes alone. No, there's all kinds of ways for water to egress. Also, there is another issue, as they say in England. There's another issue with regard to putting pebbles here so you don't clog your weep holes. I always think that's kind of funny. And then some people are like, well, let me put spacers there instead, you know, because I got abundance of rubber spacers I can put there. But a lot of people are doing pebbles, and some of those pebbles are small, and even if they're large, that pebble just gets stuck there. I don't even know if I got a pebble. I don't have a pebble around. But the pebble, potentially, when you're pushing down all the mortar and screeding it out and all that stuff, you're packing down all your mortar and all those pebbles that you stacked around there. So the pebbles are getting mixed with the mortar, and it becomes cement. It becomes concrete, rather. Also, a pebble is very dense. It's very difficult if a pebble gets stuck in all or one of these weep holes, or even in these, because some of your pebbles are bigger, that it gets stuck in there, and then water has a more difficult way to egress than it would if you just had sand topping mix. If you push sand topping mix on top of here, then the water would get through there. You have about 1/4 of an inch, same as over here, about 1/4 of an inch of sand topping mix that you're clogging, as this one is, that you're clogging your weep hole with. So if I poured water right on top of there, water would emanate through the bottom of that very easily. But if I stuck a rock in there, it would be much more difficult, especially with the sand surrounding that rock. The rock is more dense. I know that I don't want to talk down to you. I know this sounds like really elementary, but a lot of people never really think things through. They read something, they watch a video on somebody else's channel, and there is no explanation. There's no logic or thinking. It's just, oh, okay, well, let me do it that way. It makes sense. But you got to think a little deeper. Think a little deeper when you're thinking about water. Water has different ways to egress. Anyway. There it goes. This is a weep hole protector. And as you can see, there's an obvious up and down. See where those channels are? Those are the top channels. So you want those little recesses out there, the ridge of the recess, sitting flat on the shower pan, so that if any water potentially gets into your pan, that it has everywhere there's a ridge here is basically a trough, like I just showed you on the drain. So you have there's a lot of troughs going on here. And then if water does get low enough over here, then the opposite trough would allow water in. Sorry, if the water got high enough, then the opposite trough would kick in. And that's just basically placed on top of your drain. If I had 2 hands, there we go. On top of your drain barrel. And then, same process. Take that down. And then eventually this sits flat because you're putting mortar, all your mortar mix and everything on top of that, and it sits flat to your shower floor. So water would have a way of egress. If you wanted to do a weed pole protector, then by all means. So I'll get probably a good, probably 2 inches of mortar going down to this 1 inch, so that I have a pretty profound slope going on, because the intent is to pour water on top with a plug inside of there, so that any water that aggresses will egress through everything that I just talked about, go down the bottom. I'll have a bucket, I'll mark it same way as Isaac did, and we will see how much water comes out of there as opposed to his video. Okay, so I'm still going to do the mortar experiment, but and I put a line there on this bucket. That's where I'm going to let the water go up to, is that line, and we should have just about the same amount of water coming out as we do going in. Okay, that's exactly where the water line should be when I'm done. I think I lost a little bit of water through the splashing, but it shouldn't be much. But an interesting thing here, I have this level as flat as possible on top of here, and it is completely level. It is said that 1/4 inch per foot is a slope that you have to make on your pre-slope. So what I have is a couple of shims that are exactly 1/4 of an inch. I will even show you on this tape measure. There you go. It's 1/4 of an inch. If I can hold it still. And I have it resting on this 2x4. So I'm going to stick these 1/4 inch shims. I've got 2 of them, one on the left and one on the right side. I'm going to stick those up under there with that 1/4 of an inch. This is about 9 inches, 9 to 10 inches. It's not quite a foot. So this is better than a 1/4 inch per foot. And see if that does anything to the water. Now the level is off, which it should be. And see if we have that 1/4 inch in play. There's your 1/4 inch right there, and there's your level. Actually a little higher than that. Right there is your level, and there's your 1/4 inch. And it's not affecting the water flow. There's a little bit going out, as you can see right there. But I'm not hearing it the way that I was before. But regardless, there's still an accumulation of water in here, even with your 1/4 inch slope going on in a non-gravity environment, which in that case it should work better than an absence of gravity environment, right? You would think. This would work better to channel water than it would if you had a bunch of mortar in the way, right? Let's see how far it would take. Let's see. Because I'm curious as you are. What gets this exactly right? About 1/2 inch. Put both of these together to give me a good 1/2 inch. And what's happened? Water's evacuating a little better with 1/2 inch. Oh yeah. That bucket I had started out, I think it's 2.5 gallon. I don't know if it's 2.5 gallon to the top or not, but it's basically 2 gallons of water. And I have some ounces left. I'm not going to sit here all day for all the water to trickle down, but you kind of get the idea, the gist of it. There's some water that I ended up catching up on the top of this plug also that's sitting there. So I don't know, like I said, 4 or 5 ounces. I'll pour it out. I'll let you see how much was caught. Yeah, so I poured all the water out of the bucket that I caught it with. As you can see, there's about a 3/4 of an inch difference. And so this is a residual. This is what was left over that wouldn't come out of the pan. As I said, it's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 ounces or something like that. Let's see if that takes up the difference. Yep, that does it. So that gets you back up to the line. With all the weight of the mortar on the pan will, because, you know, obviously this pan is sitting up in a lot of places, a little cool out here, but I think once all the weight gets down onto the pan material and it has an ability to go down to all of these holes, that it will be a better experiment. It is said you should have a dry pack with your mortar mix, meaning that your mortar mix is just moist enough to where you can clump it in your hand and it doesn't fall apart. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I want to be able to compare apples to apples here with Isaac, so you know, I think it's important to, as much as I can anyway, replicate what he did. Because I think ultimately information is good. And since we don't know the result of the final outcome, I'm finding out as you find out. Because all I have ever based my work on is logic. If something makes sense, or if it doesn't make sense, then I would rather go with my everything is level around the edges, same as I would do in a normal shower. Everything is sloped down to the drain, same as I would do in a normal shower. This mock-up shower pan has set up for over a week now. A lot of people have been getting after me, how come I haven't posted this yet? I've just been too busy, actually. But I am ready for the process to begin, as Isaac did on his video with the pre-slope. He actually saturated it with water first. I don't know how long he waited before he continued with his test. But the reason he saturated it with water is because in an ideal world, if you're having an issue, the pan is already wet. You've already had a shower. You know, morning, night, whatever. How many people are going to take a shower in that particular day is how much water content you're going to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate taking a shower by pouring water on this and getting it as soaked as possible. And here's what I was talking about. Here's what I talk about on a lot of my videos: the wicking, the wicking of the water on a pre-slope. If you'd done a pre-slope, all this water would go down and get wicked up, and you would have a saturated pan regardless. It's a matter of how much water comes out afterward, I guess, is the point that people are trying to make. So this has taken quite a bit of water. I'm never going to hear it go down to the drain. So I've stepped up my game and I have a pot. Get this as saturated as I possibly can. Now you're hearing it. So the weep holes are kicking in. And guess what? There's no weep hole protector. And there's no pebbles. There's no nothing down there. People get on to me about, don't clog your weep holes with mortar. You saw how easily water saturated into the mortar. If you put a pebble in there, it's a dense material, and you could clog it with a pebble. But with sand, which is what this is, sand mortar mix, you're not going to clog. I mean, even if you do clog, water is making its way out. So no issues there. It dispels that myth. Mythbusters. People say I'm a maverick.
Right. Ugh, I knew you weren't cool. No, hold on a minute.
No, I just think, just think a little bit. Like, why would you ever clog your weep holes with rocks? It makes no sense. It's illogical. Anyway, so now that I know this pan is 100% saturated with water, I'm going to replicate this. This is evening time, and tomorrow morning I'm going to use this whole pot again, pour that in there as if I'm taking another shower, so that I can make sure that this is constantly saturated with water. I might do it a third time tomorrow afternoon. I might do the same thing so that I know that I have a fair test, so that when I actually do pour my measured amount of water in there and catch it, that it should be about the same as Isaac did in his video. But I can't do that as long as there's a possibility of water getting in there. Now you would think because it stopped dripping, but that's all I need to do, right? Well, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to say there's still a lot of wicking action going on in here. Even though it went down, water is still finding its way and getting this thing totally saturated. And as we do in real life, we're taking showers constantly every day before there's ever a problem. So I just want this, you can almost see it drying out again. Maybe, I don't know. But I want this as saturated as possible before I actually do my test. That's the point. It is the next day, and I would put a moisture meter on here to check the water content, but I don't need to because I know it's going to show 100%. My moisture meter doesn't show percentage, it shows the value, and I think it tops out about 35, and this is definitely a 35. There's a bunch of water that's pooled up around here, but I'm not really worried about that. This is not 24 hours later, this is the next day. This is probably about 12, 14 hours later, and it's still somewhat damp. Damp enough that if this was a normal shower, this would be kind of atypical if water got into your pan because it's an accumulation effect. So I'm going to go ahead and accumulate more. Now you can see from the first time to the second time, the first time it really soaked it up quickly and spread it out, and now it's just kind of there. Alright, I'm finally ready for my test. The last couple of days I've soaked this shower pan to make sure that it has pretty good saturation. There's no dripping going on. I think I poured the last water in here probably about an hour ago, so any water that's left over residual has already gone out. If there's still any at the bottom, like some people contend, then it's still at the bottom. Either which way, I have marked both of these. My bad, I didn't mark that one because it doesn't matter. So I'm right up to that line right there, right just below that where that line is at with my water, and then I'm going to pour this into there, and that's going to be the water that I pour in. And at the end of the experiment, the water should be back up to that level, or just slightly below that. I have a little bit of water standing in here, not quite all the way, but I'm going to add some more to it because I did tip this over a little bit to see how heavy it was, and a little water went into the sand. So I don't want that to be an issue that I'm missing a little bit of water when I never had any to begin with. So I'm going to pour a little water inside of there before I start the experiment. Just up to the edge to make sure. That's it. I do not know the results of what this will happen on this eventually. You are watching it as I do, so it'll be interesting. actually waited 2 weeks because I've been busy and I haven't been able to, a lot of people have gotten on to me, when's the experiment going to happen? I've been very busy, so I haven't been able to do anything. There's no water left in there. Not even a drop. Well, a couple drops. Yeah, there we go. So we have a while before that fills up, and once that happens, I will come back. I know some of you are curious about the process. I would videotape the whole thing, but my video would end up way longer than it is. This is about 5 minutes in. So we're better than halfway up already, and the water's steady streaming in. Interesting, it's only been about 12 minutes. Look at that. I mean, like literally right under the line.
That could be my favorite thing I ever seen.
If there's any water content still in there because I didn't do a pre-slope, it's ounces, like literally ounces. I was not expecting that. In fact, on the videos that I make where I talk about pre-slope not being necessary, I agree that there could be some water content in there because it's flat. Although I do, when I do my bottom drain flange, I always taper out so my flange is flat as well. So my contention is, yes, there might be minuscule water content, but you still have a saturated shower pan whether you have a pre-slope or not. This sand particles are binded by cement, and cement will degrade because you have chemicals in your water, your shampoo, your cleaning detergents and stuff like that. It's going to degrade all of that cement. That's not something that this is what I know. I've literally had customers scoop up sand after they've taken their tile off because it's come loose. Scoop up sand in their hand and say, why do I have sand? And I said, because that's the way it started and all your cement product has deteriorated. Which will happen when you have, as I said, all those chemicals inside of there. So whether or not you have a pre-slope or not, your pan is still saturated. It still has an ability for all those chemicals to permeate into your pan. And the whole idea of a pre-slope is water in, water out. And what we had with no pre-slope is water in, water out. I was actually expecting it to fail. I think with logic and common sense dictates my day. And anybody else who just follows the lead is kind of like the emperor's clothes. The emperor's new clothes, as it were. Google that, you'll see what I'm talking about on that story if you don't remember it from childhood. The emperor's new clothes. Yeah, so there you go. But this is actually quite surprising. I was not expecting this at all. I know I'm repetitive in a lot of stuff I say, but I'm still very surprised at the result. I figured that maybe without a pre-slope, you know, I'm coming down just below the line and there's some water that's stagnant that's going to sit in there. But that's not the case. I mean, it's literally to the line that I put it at. So that is a surprising result. Regardless that I was looking, yes, I was definitely looking for that result, but I didn't expect it at all. Just for my peace of mind. I'll not change my method. Definitely now, based on this, I will not change my method. I will not continue going forward with thinking, man, maybe I should do a pre-slope. I just absolutely have no doubt now whatsoever that the pre-slope is useless. That's just my opinion. You could differ with my opinion, and I'm sure you will if you've done pre-slopes all your life. But that's opposed to me not having done pre-slopes and getting this result. Makes me happy. Let me show you something. I told you when the video first began, all drains are going to have a barrel, screw type barrel, and that's an ingress for water. almost all drains are going to have the bottom trough that's right next to the pan liner and the top trough, which is 1/8 of an inch up. They're all going to have weep holes, and they're all going to have these little divots, these little areas where your bolts go into. So there's a lot of ways for water to egress. The point being is that everything's clogged up yet. In about roughly 12 minutes, more or less, all my water that I poured in there was able to get out. I don't know what else to say. You know, for probably the last 3 or 4 years, I've challenged people to do a mock-up like this to show me that a pre-slope works. And so somebody did. But it was a fouled experiment because it wasn't done without a pre-slope. So now I've done one, and I really didn't want to have to go through all the trouble to do one, but now it's done. And if I've convinced nobody else out there, I've at least convinced myself.
All right, let's check our YouTube channel and see how we're doing.
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, then subscribe. Hit that button and subscribe. I make nothing off of YouTube, so please be a Patreon member. I'm going to post a link down below to my Patreon account, and you can donate $1, $5, $10, $20 a month. Just pledge that on a monthly basis. That will help me produce more videos and content so that you can watch and learn from my channel. And donate at least $50 if you're going to call. If you're going to call for advice, donate to my PayPal, please. Donate first, and then feel free to call me or email me for advice. Otherwise, business calls only, please.